Allow me to introduce our moderator for today. Fond of biking, long distance alone or in a group of like-minded people, Mr. Shahrukh Kasad has been biking for last 45 years. He believes that the journey is important as is the destination. Also, a collector of vintage classic bikes and cars, Shahrukh sir has had a Royal Enfield Bullet 1969 model since 1983, which is in regular use. And now, without further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce our author to you all. Amrit Raj is an award winning author and a brand enthusiast. He was a national editor with Mint and led the newspaper National Corporate Bureau till April 2019. He has written on Indian corporate and MNCs, family businesses, and other issues dodging the corporate world. Amrit has also held senior editorial leadership positions at prominent publications such as Mint and Deccan Chronicle. His book, Indian Icon, a cult called Royal Enfield, won the prestigious Gaja Capital Business Book Prize 2021. I'd request Shahrukh sir to take the session forward along with Amrit sir. A huge round of applause for both our moderator and author.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Thank you. Thanks for the lovely introduction.
Yeah, thank you. And I welcome Amrit Raj here to Nagpur. It's his first visit, and I hope he has a good time. He's here for 2 days, and we have been interacting on WhatsApp and chats. So I think we'll go forward.
Yeah, thank you, Shahrukh. Thank you, everyone. Just lovely to be here in this part of the country. It's a pleasure to be talking to you about something which is not so often talked about, the brands that we build in India and how we take them global. Very niche, but extremely important as India comes up as a country, as a business destination. The stories that we build, they need to be conveyed to the larger world. So this book was an attempt to deliver that. Thank you.
Okay. Amrit, first, let me congratulate you for writing a wonderful narrative about an iconic brand. The Bullet and the Royal Enfield Company have always been in minds of bikers and the public. And they went through a rough patch, let's say from the 80s. And of course, then the Lals took it over in the early 1990s. And Siddharth Lal, especially in the mid-90s. And he turned it around. It's a wonderful story. And of course, he became a favorite of the stock market in the bargain. And the stock went absolutely, it broke all the glass ceilings. And it's been a wonderful journey for Siddharth and for Royal Enfield in India. And when they went global, they again had tremendous success, I would say, in Europe, especially in Australia. And the range of models that are now available, I think the Japs or the Japs themselves don't have anything to compete with Royal Enfield. So it's been a big success story. And Siddharth Lal definitely stands out as a leader with conviction and belief in his brand. When it was rock bottom, he believed in it. It could go way high, and he really worked hard for it. So, and he had an unenviable job of turning the company around with lot of naysayers who did not believe that it could be turned around. In fact, the bankers and all had offered this Royal Enfield to 3 business groups in South India, and they had refused. No, this is a losing proposition, we cannot. When Vikram Lal, Siddharth's father, took over and invested what looks like now to be a very small sum of 3 crores for a company which is now worth 10,000 crores. So all this is the background, and Amrit has captured beautifully all the ups and downs and how the personalities, lot of people came from different brands, from different segments, like R.L. Ravichandran came in from Bajaj, but Rudy Singh came in from Unilever in Singapore, I think. So they were different people, different personalities, but they worked for a Royal Enfield. So it's a very good year. Now my main first question is, you are a writer for Mint or a journalist with Mint. And what was the inspiration which inspired you to take up this book? Was it the success of the bike as such or the stock market success?
Is it okay if I don't use mic? Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay, perfect. So to answer that question, I'll just start reading a couple of pages, first couple of pages from my book. The prologue starts with chasing the cult. On National Highway 62 connecting Jodhpur and Ahmedabad, 53 kilometers before the town of Pali, stands a shrine without a god in residence. And yet every year, scores of people stop to pay respects and utter a prayer to deity of sorts, a 350cc Royal Enfield, numbered RNJ 7773, standing still on a cement platform, protected in glass cage. There is a bust and a photograph of its owner, Om Singh Rathod, which feature in the background of thousands of selfies taken at the spot by enthusiastic travelers. The shrine, popularly known as Bullet Baba Temple, is mostly frequented by young men who visit the place after purchasing a new bike, or by women who seek Rathod's blessings for their husband's safety on the road. There is also a tree near the shrine around which people tie a red thread, symbolizing their faith in Bullet Baba. Everything in that space resembles a traditional temple with minor difference. There is no holy water, but people bring a bottle of whiskey as part of the ritual. How did this unusual temple come to be? Legend has it that the bullet belonged to the son of a local village leader who met with an accident in 1988 and died where the shrine stands today. The local police took the motorcycle to the nearest police station, but the next day the motorcycle was back at the accident spot. The police took it back to the station only to find that the vehicle had returned to the same spot. This continued for a few days till the villagers decided to build a shrine in Rathod's name, Om Bana, and he became the patron saint of NH62, protecting people from accidents. The entire story might seem straight out of the playbook of Rajasthan Tourism's Jaane Kya Dikh Jaye advertisement. But this is the story of a man who loved his Royal Enfield Bullet so much that the bike continues to stand in for him and evoke love, respect, pride and passion for the owner several years after his death. More importantly, it is also about those villagers who felt that man and machine should not be parted in death and built a shrine for them to stay together. At the time of Rathod's untimely death, the Royal Enfield was bleeding severely. In 1988, the world's oldest motorcycle brand, in continuous production for the last 100 years, feared its end was near. Debtors were breathing down the neck of its promoters, and the company was about to be dragged to the Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction. And yet, it had its loyalists over generations who stuck by the brand for years, keeping the company relevant in India's cultural landscape. What is it about the Royal Enfield that inspires this kind of devotion? Is it the look of the machine, its imitable sound, the story of how it came to be, how it nearly died, and the way in which it was resurrected? What makes brands successful? What lies at the heart of any product that has survived years of market forces, changing management, good and bad press, and time itself? The people who believe in the brand. Why does Royal Enfield matter? I could give you a host of reasons, but I would rather let faithful speak. The company might belong to an industrial family, but make no mistake, Royal Enfield has always belonged to its riders. And the story of the brand is the story of these people as well. So like Shahrukh introduced the book about Siddharth Lal and how he turned it around and how the brand actually was sold for 3 crore to the Lal family, and went on to become a 10,000 crore brand. Behind this, there's a lot of stories of people like you and me who have some early memory of either roaming around on our uncle's motorcycle, which is a Bullet, or stealing our father's motorcycle to take it to the nearest, nearest market in our colony. My early memory was every time a Bullet would pass by my house, I would come out running to see what is it. It generated a kind of curiosity. And during the course of my research for the book and the people that I spoke with, there were several emotional attributes that came out. Like people said that it taught them patience. Largely because Royal Enfield as a motorcycle is so cumbersome and it used to break down so frequently that you needed a lot of patience to ride that motorcycle. While it's very, very material in a way, but also very philosophical in another way. People would go out on a ride to say Ladakh or Bhutan or other parts of the country just to discover themselves. Some people also said that it's a home wrecker because you're not spending time with your wives and children, and you're spending. Some people said they found companionship. Some people found friends for life. The curiosity that I faced was, what does this have? It's an object, right? It's a machine. But why are people so fascinated about it? Then I did a peer-to-peer comparison, and I found Royal Enfield to be the most bulky and very hard to maintain. There was a point in time when it used to leak and people used to call it Royal Oil Field because the oil used to come from the petrol tank and the engine. Then I compared, okay, does it give you the best mileage? No. Is it easy to maintain? No. Is it easier to service? No. Then what is it about the machine and the brand that make people so emotional about it? So the book is an attempt to find that. In the course of my research, I met this gentleman called P. Tankamani, who is known as Bullet Money in Kerala. The magic of the person is that he cannot speak any other language but Malayalam, but he gets a lot of clients and customers, not from India, but from countries like UK and Australia, who send their motorcycles to him and to get them repaired. And the language of conversation is very strange because the guy doesn't understand English or Hindi or any other language. So the customer actually makes sound of the problem. There is, for example, there is a problem in the engine. So the customer will say tick, 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 and the guy will understand that what is the problem with the motorcycle, and he'll fix it. And he has fixed more than 600,000 motorcycles in his life the last 50 odd years, to an extent that now he has trained his daughters to fix motorcycles. Now think about it, a truck driver's son he doesn't want to become a truck driver. But here's a guy who has preserved the legacy of the brand. And mind you, during a period when Royal Enfield was going through a lot of crazy times, it was getting on the verge of getting shut. But then there are people like Tankamani who have preserved the legacy of that motorcycle and has maintained that emotional attachment with the brand, with the motor, as well as the machine. Then I met this gentleman from Chennai called G. Subhash Chandra Bose, named after the famed freedom fighter from West Bengal. The guy used to participate in a lot of motorcycling races in Chennai and across the country back in the 70s. It used to be called All India Motorcycling Championship, and he wasn't winning on other motorcycles. And then in 1973 or so, he participated in the race on a Bullet, and from then he won it for 6 years in a row, right? And that guy has kind of traveled across the country, has been to several places, and all his life he's devoted for the motorcycle and for the machine. So coming back to Shahruk's point, yes, Siddharth Lal, Vikram Lal, Rudy, a lot of guys have played a significant part in bringing Royal Enfield to where it is right now. One of the reasons why I wrote this book was that I wanted to discover an Indian brand which could actually go global and become a premium brand. Right now, if you go to say Paris or London or anywhere in the world or Tokyo, you don't find an Indian brand. You don't have say the fast food joint or a car brand or a retail store which is originated out of India. And if you look around, there aren't many perhaps will come up in the next few years. But here is a brand which has actually done that, started to do it very early years, but is doing phenomenally well. So we adopted this British brand, which was shut down in the UK in 1967, continued, it chugged along on Indian roads for a good number of years, and has now actually become an Indian brand and has taken the legacy across the world. So that's in short, at length, is what the book is all about.
That's good. My next question is, how did the management take up the idea of your writing a book and opening, say, the dark secrets or the skeletons, exposing the skeletons in the cupboard? Because they had been through a rough patch. And did they say, okay, we are open to the idea, you write everything? Or did they try to keep everything under wraps?
It was actually very hot and cold. So 2015 is when Siddharth Lal and I discussed that, okay, let's do a book on Enfield. And around that time, the brand had very successfully revived itself in India and was charting the course to go to the foreign markets. And Siddharth very readily agreed. I'm a journalist, I'm lazy, so it took me some time to write the pitch, find a publisher through my agent. In 2018, I kind of went back to him. He said, sure, let's do it. We met in Chennai at his Adyar store. Had a lengthy conversation with other guys. This is all being facilitated through the company, and I signed a contract with Westland, which used to be an Amazon company back then. And as I was halfway through the book, the support that I was getting from the company withered away. No response to my mails, phones, etc. But as I had been a reporter as well as an editor, I had known the company inside out, people associated with it. What I'm trying to say is the task became difficult, but using my network and sources, I managed to complete the book. While it made the process difficult, it also, company not participating in the book after a point, also gave me the freedom of looking at things that in a usual environment would not have been allowed, which is looking at the management practices, looking at personality clashes, looking at people's thought process, looking at the character of Siddharth Lal himself, the kind of character that he is. And perhaps that's the reason why this book is so successful today, it is so objective, and people are referring to it. So yeah.
Amrit, could you please use the mic? It's not audible.
When Eicher took over in the early 1990s, when they did that 26% stake buyout from the Vishwanathan family, did they ever dream in their wildest dreams that Royal Enfield would achieve the scales? They were manufacturing, I think, 24,000 or 25,000 bikes annually, going in a big loss. Everything was here. The HR was a mess. Product was a mess. So did Eicher think in their wildest dreams that they would be able to achieve the success they did 15 years later?
No, the short answer to that question is no. However, there's a context to Eicher's decision back in 1990, and it had to do with Siddharth's father, Vikram Lal. It's very unlike a businessman, typical businessman that we have these days. Very humble, fairly well educated, and knew the art that he was into. He was an introvert, but he had this ambition of growing the group, which was then into making tractors and light commercial vehicles and trucks. He had never thought that he would perhaps get into a B2C kind of a market where he'll be selling directly to the customer. The only reason why he got into this was he, at one point in time, had this red Bullet Machismo, and he just loved riding it. And he happened to be on the board of Madras Motors, which used to be owned by the Vishwanathan family. And the company was going bankrupt, and the bankers were looking for potential buyers, and they couldn't find one. At that point in time, like Shahrukh mentioned in the beginning, same bankers had gone to 3 separate members of Venu Srinivasan family, asking them to buy the company, and they all refused. Vikram knew that the company is in a lot of trouble, but he also identified the jewel in the crown, which was the Bullet motorcycle. The only reason why he bought the company was he could see the love and affection that we Indians had with that particular motorcycle. And he realized that that motorcycle is a story, and the way you weave that story around and take it to more and more people, that will decide the fortune and the fate of the brand. So to the answer that whether he thought it would turn out to be what it is right now, he did not. But what he always believed in was the idea of Royal Enfield. And the idea of Royal Enfield is not that I'm going to take out my motorcycle and go to work tomorrow. That's not what a Royal Enfield does. The idea of Royal Enfield is tomorrow Shah Rukh and I will ride from, along with a bunch of friends, will ride from Nagpur to Ladakh. That might happen once in 5 years, but that's the idea that lingers on in the minds of a lot of people. And that's why Royal Enfield exists.
Okay, that's good. After Siddharth joined the company, he went in for product development in a big way. The UC engine came up in 2008. Do you think if the engine had been launched 10 years ago, say in the late 90s, Enfield would have been able to take on the Japanese and the other, and been a success it was, or it was the right time, the change, though late for the company? Was it at the right time they launched it?
I think it was at the right time. They could have done it 10 years ago, but they didn't have money. So,
yeah, the money was a big problem because they were in a big loss.
yeah.
So,
Also, you look at it, UC engine changed Royal Enfield's fortune in many ways, because that engine was meant for the classic 350 and 500cc motorcycles that we come to know. But eventually that engine went into all the motorcycles, which brought in an economy of scale, brought the costs down, and made the company profitable. So that engine has a very, while a lot of like purists like Shah Rukh would complain that that engine doesn't have the thump and the sound that the original iron cast engine used to have, but in a lot of ways, that engine gets credit for the fact that Royal Enfield survived through the times, and it is what it is today.
yeah. The UC engine got a new lot of customers who traditionally were opposed to the wrong side gear and brake gear and the engine. So with the new engine and with the gear and the brake being shifted to the opposite sides, it brought in a whole new, who would have gone for Japanese 100cc or 150cc bikes. So that was a very
absolutely. It opened up the motorcycles target audience to a lot many people than just Shah Rukh and his friends.
Yeah, I have a 1969 Bullet still, and it's got the brake on the left side, so not many people can ride it. So it's a different ride altogether. In your book, you have mentioned very little about the Vishwanathan family, the original year. There were no photographs and no from the Vishwanathan family side.
Actually,
from 1955, they were assembling and all.
No, there are a few photographs. See, the challenge with Vishwanathan family was that they spread themselves into too many business areas. Royal Enfield was a motorcycle brand. You cannot be selling generators and televisions in that name, right? So from a strategy point of view, that's where they went wrong. And not their fault also, because see, 60s and 70s was when Indian business was really opening up. And these guys used to be official importers of some of the bicycles in pre-independent era and even after the independence. The reason why they got the contract to manufacture Royal Enfield motorcycles, because they were perhaps the only, or maybe just among a few importers of certain motorcycles and bicycles to the country, and their relationship with the then finance minister Krishnamachari. Yeah, I mean, their role in preserving Royal Enfield was limited to the fact that they sold engines and generators and televisions and seeds in the name of Royal Enfield.
So they spread it too thin all around like. Okay, R.L. Ravichandran,
Yeah.
ex-Bajaj.
Great guy.
Great guy. He was the man behind the Pulsar success story, and he joined Royal Enfield, and he had to fight many a battle on many fronts. Quality of the product, labor relations, okay, dealer network, everything like when he joined the company, everything was not up to industry standards, you can say.
Yeah.
And he says in this book, it took me 1 year just to understand how Royal Enfield worked.
Yeah.
And his question to himself was, why are these idiots buying our bikes? These bikes don't give good average. They are cumbersome to ride. They break down frequently. They don't give good average. There's nothing going for the bike. But then, even then, there are loyalists who are buying this bike. So that was his greatest question to himself. And how he turned it around, like on each year.
Yeah, I mean, he has a very fascinating story. Those of you who followed the automotive sector, there was a massive feud in the late 90s between the late Rahul Bajaj and his son Rajiv. Rajiv was this new blood who was brought into this world, and Rahul, of course, has been the legendary businessman that he has been. And Rajiv could see that the era of scooters is ending. But Rahul was of the opinion that, I have created this industry in the last 50 years, and there's no way it's going to die. And Rajiv wanted to kill scooters and launch motorcycles, which is when Pulsar and Discovers of the world happened. Everybody aligned with Rahul because of the personality that he had, to an extent that Rajiv in the board meeting offered to his father that if he doesn't get to run the company the way he wants, here is his resignation. And the only person who stood by Rajiv Bajaj at that point in time was R.L. Ravichandran. So that's the background of this gentleman. He established Bajaj motorcycles, launched Pulsar, and then he wanted to do things on his own. Maybe start a company or something through which he could build his own legacy. And at that point in time, Siddharth was reorganizing his family businesses. Tractor was his main business, which he sold off to Mallika Srinivasan, Tafe. And everybody questioned that, this is your bread and butter, maximum money you derive out of it. Why are you selling it? People criticized him. R.L. Ravichandran got an impression that Siddharth might also sell Royal Enfield. So he reached out to Siddharth along with a couple of bankers like Goldman Sachs and others, saying, would you want to sell this to us? Siddharth was pleasantly surprised because till a few months ago, there were no buyers. He was looking to raise money. He wasn't getting money. And then now suddenly there is somebody who's making an offer to him to buy. While at the heart, he was not very sure because if you read the book, you'll see his personal side as well. He's not been a very bright student, although went to Doon School in Stephens, but fairly average guy in academics. Though the reason why he survived and later thrived was because of the passion that he had for the motorcycles. So much on that later. So he knew that the only thing that he could do in life was to ride motorcycles and perhaps run a motorcycle company. But this option of selling it to R.L. Ravichandran was very tempting. Several meetings happened to an extent that even the management said, okay, yes, let's sell it off and get rid of it because it was still loss-making in the early 2000s. But Siddharth made him an offer. Said, listen, let's do one thing. I am walking out of this. Why don't you come and join me and run the way you want Royal Enfield to be run? So that's how R.L. Ravichandran came on board. It wasn't exactly what he wanted because he wanted full control. And the investors that he had got with him were looking to put in money, revive the company, maybe do a public listing or sell it off at a profit 3-4 times of whatever they were putting. So that was the whole plan, but that did not happen. What actually happened was both R.L. Ravichandran and Siddharth's love for the machine and the brand was greater than the money and the larger business plan that the bankers were bringing in. So that's how R.L. Ravichandran got associated with Royal Enfield, and he thought everybody in the book you'll find whenever they entered the brand or the company, they realize it's a very easy game till they realize it's not an easy game. And that story was not very different for R.L. Ravichandran as well, because like Shahrukh said, he took around 1 year to figure out what is happening in the company. What are the problems? What are the quality issues? And at that point in time, Royal Enfield was just dependent upon one motorcycle, which is Bullet 350, although they were launching derivatives of that in terms of Electra and others. So the problem was not only to fix the quality, get the company profitable, but also to launch a product to grow the company. Otherwise, there's no way he could have helped the brand survive and grow. And then there are sweeping changes. Like he really I think in his late 40s or early 50s, he really brought in that bandwidth and experience that he had gathered in the automotive industry. Through using his network, he changed the vendors, because one of the problems that Royal Enfield faced in the beginning was it was a small company selling 30,000 units in a year, which means 2,000 odd units in a year, which means if you want to get a particular part made at a supplier, you will not be his or her top priority. He'll rather be making it for a Hero Honda or a Bajaj or a TVS, but for Royal Enfield, which means your parts are not reaching to the market in time, which means there are consumer complaints, which will affect your brand, and blah, blah, blah. R.L. Ravichandran, because of the personality that he was, he used his network to convince the supplier community that here is a brand on which you can take a bet. And he did multiple such things. Over a period of 3-4 years, he completely cleaned up the system. He brought in new manufacturing practices, and in a way dragged the brand back on the path of profitability and growth. And also in the meantime conceived, designed, and helped manufacture the classic 350cc motorcycle, which redefined the fate of Royal Enfield.
That's good. So here we have a man from the automobile industry who helped Royal Enfield get back numbers to a very decent level. The second person who joined, who would be instrumental in bumping up the numbers from 3 lakh bikes a year to 8 lakh bikes a year, was the late Rudra Tej Rudy Singh. He came from Unilever, Hong Kong and Singapore, and he joined Enfield, and he turned it around in a very big way, though he had a lot of personality clashes with everybody, including the labor force.
Yeah. So Rudy's stint was fairly instrumental and exceptional in Royal Enfield's history. Rudy had come from an FMCG background where numbers matter. Numbers in terms of what you're selling, at what margins, what's your EBITDA. Whereas Royal Enfield as a company was more about lifestyle. The the brand was selling not because they wanted to sell more, but because more and more people were adopting the lifestyle that they were selling. So there was a fundamental difference, which happened at Royal Enfield with the incoming of Rudy. Rudy wanted to change it, and he, to an extent, also changed it completely in both good and bad ways. Brought in a lot of consumer-focused and centric approach. Brought in a lot of focus on service, on quality. If you see the motorcycles that they are making now, a lot of the learnings happened during Rudy's time. He was one of those exceptional professionals at Royal Enfield who took this risk of telling the people that whatever you are doing is wrong. So far, just because Royal Enfield was selling as a lifestyle, people were fairly comfortable. They were negligent about the problems that a customer was facing, the supplier issue, the quality issue of the motorcycle. He came and he literally taught them and said that you cannot be taking your customer for granted. And he made those changes. And while making those changes, look, what happens is when you are used to working in a particular environment for a long time, especially when you are not doing well and then you are doing very well, and then somebody comes and tells you that you are useless. Right? That's what Rudy effectively did. And then there was a clash of the old guard versus the new guard. Nobody who's done well would like to hear that he's not good enough. But what Rudy was trying to say is that you've come here, great, but from here to go to the next level, you have to change yourself. And you have to evolve like a consumer company. Perhaps the approach could have been different, nicer. I think Rudy softer. The people management skills were missing. But all credit to him. During Rudy's time, like Shahrukh said, sales went up to 8 lakh units per year from 3 lakh in a matter of 3 to 4 years. The EBITDA margin was 28% for Royal Enfield, which was unheard of in global automotive history. So he managed to bring in those changes, but what got impacted was the culture and the sheer belief of what Royal Enfield stood for, which we spoke about in the beginning, which is about emotions, which is about stories, which is about companionship, which is about finding yourself. Those things started to take a back seat, and that led to some clash, and eventually Rudy had to move on from Mari.
Yeah, that's right. And he passed away when he was, I think, president of BMW,
Yes.
India.
Yeah.
And the third person I would like to hear is Sachin Chauhan.
Yeah.
Sachin Chauhan was a journalist, I think, with Car and Bike or Auto Car or something, with one of the auto magazines. And he wrote to Leh. He formed a group, and they started riding to Leh. Then he joined Royal Enfield. And I think, in a way, he was instrumental in these long rides. You can call him the lord of long rides in Royal Enfield.
So see, Royal Enfield spent 100 crore in marketing and advertising every year, but you will not find their ads in papers or in television or hoardings. They spend majority of that money on building this community that they have, which is a community of people who ride together, who tell stories. And Sachin Chauhan is the person who built that community for them. Used to be a journalist, and he also, for the longest time, held the record of. So there's a circuit in Madras where they race motorcycles. He's one of the fastest bikers in that particular circuit to date. Nobody has kind of broken his record. The management lesson here is you don't need an MBA degree to turn a brand around, right? Sachin Chauhan isn't an MBA. He's been a journalist who writes, but he perhaps created one of the most fundamental things that was required for Royal Enfield to survive and thrive, which was the community of motorcyclists. Take the community deeper into the market, make more people convert from a commuter segment to the Royal Enfield. So Sachin had a big role to play there.
Right. And even their annual get-togethers that they have at Goa and all different places.
So
that has helped a lot.
Yeah. So Rider Mania, and then you have Himalayan Odyssey. All these are programs where these worshippers like Shahrukh, they congregate once and twice a year, and they celebrate the legacy of Enfield and the love for the bikes.
Amrit has got a special term for people like me. He calls them eccentric gearheads.
I also have another term for people like me, called fashion riders who don't ride very often, but once in a while they ride and they call themselves motorcyclists.
Okay. But it's people like us, the eccentric gearheads, who kept the Bullet brand alive in the people's mind and in the rider's mind also.
It's
who
people,
didn't buy.
it's people like us, fashion riders, who are giving the money back to the company.
Yes.
Then the brand has survived for so long.
Enfield had a lot of smaller models also.
Yeah.
You know, like the Sherpa, the fantabulous scooter, which bombed badly at the market.
Yeah.
But they were good products.
Yeah.
But I feel that in front of the image, you put a Bullet in the same showroom and you put a fantabulous scooter, very few people will buy that scooter, would have bought that scooter.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have got the numbers.
Yeah.
But did Enfield learn a lesson that time?
They also had a diesel Bullet.
Diesel Bullet also, yes. In the 90s, early 90s, they launched a diesel Bullet.
Yeah. So see, what I'm saying is that Vishwanathan family question that you asked, I think somewhere there was a lack of understanding about what the brand stood for. You cannot be making an Enfield like Enfield television and generators. You cannot be making Enfield scooters, right? So I think that was a strategy that But I guess they didn't have a choice because the market was changing dramatically. The Japanese guys were coming in, doing the joint venture. A lot of Indian guys were on the extent of getting, on the verge of getting extinct. So they were trying different things, different kind of products came into the market, but unfortunately they didn't work.
Any other story you would like to share which you haven't shared in the book?
So, see, like I said, I'm a fashion writer. Okay. The reason for me to write this book is to identify a brand that could go global, something which we could call Indian if we visit overseas. And in the process, I discovered people like Shah Rukh and Bullet Money and Bullet Bose and all these guys, and I wrote the story. But I literally kind of saw it firsthand sometime in, I think, 2014 is when we did a bike trip with my friends. I was actually forced into it. It's very tough. Like, we flew to Leh. We took the motorcycles there, unlike people who were riding from like all kinds of places. And we rode to the Pengongso Lake. We got so tired that on our way back, we had to hire these Bolero pickups on which we put the bike, and we came back. So I'm that kind of a rider. But on the way, I saw this like hordes of motorcyclists, right? 50, 60 people, motorcycles going around and coming from the other side, and they would all do thumbs up and thumbs down, right? There's no reason for them to do it. But the terrain is so difficult. There are landslides happening. The cold is biting, like it penetrates through your bone. Like my nose, I had this massive frostbite which stayed for 3 months. Even in those terrains, they continue to kind of have this camaraderie. Thumbs up means the road is fine. Thumbs down means there's a landslide. So it doesn't happen. Why is it happening there? And there are other motorcycles also, but I found this trait largely among the Enfield group of owners. And that again tells you a story that why does it not happen with, say, a Hero Honda Splendor or a Passion or a Bajaj Pulsar or several other motorcycles, right? Why does it happen only with Royal Enfield? So, yeah.
That's good. Okay, I think our time is over now. Sure. So we'll throw it open for a question and answer session.
If audience has any questions, they can shoot them now.
Very well described, Amrit.
Thank you.
This is an iconic brand in India.
Thank you.
And I wish you threw a little more light on the armed forces and the police who actually kept this brand alive and created a very large impression in the minds of the young generation. I wonder.
No, you're very right, sir. Yeah. So one of the things, in fact, which we were discussing right before the session.
And the second question,
Yeah.
I just would like to add, Ranipet, that's where this plant was located in
Sorry, sir?
Madras. Ranipet.
Tiruvattur.
Tiruvattur?
Yeah.
The new plant or
No, the original one.
original one was in Ranipet?
North Madras, Tiruvattur.
All right. So
Yeah.
that was also a very large land bank which they had
Yeah.
at that point in time.
Yeah.
which was perhaps utilized later on for the ancillary
Yeah.
and others.
Yeah. So basically, what they used to do was they used to produce all the parts, which in a typical automotive world is sourced to the vendors. They used to do all of that themselves, which is what led to the cost structures would not grow. It will always have the burden of doing multiple things. So one of the things that Lal family did after taking over Royal Enfield was to get rid of that model and outsourcing the component supply to the tier 2, tier 1 vendors. Exactly. Uh, Going back to your first question, sir, Indian Army, Indian Armed Forces, they have a great role that they have played in ensuring that the brand lives through so many years. If you just look at the consumer profile of Royal Enfield owners, in the book I have spoken about how the motorcycle came to India. It was imported by this gentleman who also used to be the official photographer of the British government then. And they would race around. There is a mention of this race between Calcutta to Gaya in Bihar. Around 7 or 8 motorcycles had raced at that point in time. 2 of them on the podium was Royal Enfield. Then there is a mention of a letter in 1932, which is written by the son of the founder of Royal Enfield, Major Smith, who says that right now he doesn't see a lot of scope for Royal Enfield motorcycles in India, but that time is not far when he'll have the motorcycle flying across north and south and east and west of the country, which is the time that we are living in today. But he said it in 1932. And then there are traces of motorcycles. There's a function happening in Jamshedpur, which is where the Britishers are riding this motorcycle, and us Indians standing, looking, and just mesmerized by it. And then 1955 is when Indian Army raised a request for reliable, durable motorcycles to patrol the borders, northern borders with Pakistan. And a lot of credit goes to Jawaharlal Nehru for all the blame that we put on him today. He was one of the early proponents of Make in India and industrialization in India. The Indian Army the government earlier wanted to import 500 odd motorcycles from the UK. And these motorcycles were to be Royal Enfield, but Nehru said, let's do a joint venture here, and which is where Madras Motors, the Vishwanathan family came into the picture, and they formed the joint venture and started making the motorcycles here. And the first batch of 500 motorcycles was supplied to the armed forces. So what I'm saying is consumer profile changed from Britishers to the Indian Army. And in 1967, the British factory that used to make it in Coventry had this massive fire and it collapsed. And suddenly Royal Enfield in UK was dead. But in India, it chugged along. From the Indian Army, the consumer profile changed to the local henchmen, the Thanedars and Rangdars and all these people, Bahubalis of the bad cow belt where I come from. And simultaneously, Vishwanathan family's downfall in business and downfall of the brand also coincided with the changing customer profile for Royal Enfield till when the millennials started to buy, which is what Siddharth Lal and team has done, where a young graduate from college, a young professional is buying a motorcycle to go to work, thinking that one day he'll ride to Ladakh. So to your question, sir, the armed forces have all this while been constant. While several profiles have changed from Britishers to Dudwalas to the millennials, all this while the armed forces has been constant and their love for Royal Enfield is unmatchable.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you.
Sorry, but due to scarcity of time, we won't be able to take more questions. The author would be available outside, so you can ask your questions then. But have to wind up. I'm really sorry.
Thank you.
As Pablo Picasso once said, painting is just another way of keeping a diary. We have very special token of appreciation from Alag Angle community. So I'd like Mr. Shahrukh to present the painting to our author Amrit sir. The painting is made by very talented Mr. Aryan Thavri. It was conceptualized and made especially for our author. Thank you, Amrit sir and Shahrukh sir, for such an insightful right away. This is Vismay Raut, your anchor, signing off until next time. Thank you.